Next segment here, Barack Obama and the Republican Party. Listen to Charles Krauthammer's summary of what's happened. Quote, the president has delivered more for liberalism in a year and a half than any president in 50 years. He's given them national health care. He's given them heavy regulation on finance. He gave them $1 trillion to spend on every wish list that the liberals have had for the last 2 decades. He's given them 2 appointments to the Supreme Court, each of which will yield a quarter century of liberal opinions. He bailed out unions in the auto takeover. He's bailed out the teachers' unions. He's given the liberals everything he possibly could. Close quote. Polls show that 20% of Americans call themselves liberals, 40% call themselves conservatives, and 40% call themselves independents. Only 20% liberals, and those are the folks this administration seems to be paying almost exclusive attention to. You're a professional. What are the president and his advisors thinking?
Well, look, there's only one possible answer. They're true believers. This is the biggest lurch to the left in American political history. There's never been a time in American political history, you can go back to the 1790s, where you have seen the government policy move so far and so fast to the left. And this is a very left administration with a very left Congress. I mean, Peter, when you and I were in Washington in the 1980s, and we thought about Nancy Pelosi, Henry Waxman, Ed Markey.
They were the fringe.
The lunatic fringe. We thought they were the left of the House Democratic Caucus. Now they run it. Lock, stock, and barrel. They run it. And for conservative Democrats, of which are about 3, but even for moderate Democrats, of which there are a few, they cram it down their throats. And they make them vote for very left-wing stuff, or, because they've got a big enough majority, they pass stuff without their support, stuff that some of these Democrats are against, some of these moderate Democrats. But it left in the House and just as far left in the Senate. When they can get every Democrat to vote on the health care bill, even to the point where the Republicans, to embarrass them, put up an amendment that said the government cannot subsidize Viagra for sex offenders. The Democrats voted down. Now, I'm sure most of them, in practice, would have agreed that shouldn't be done.
Crazy.
But they just were going to put this bill on the president's desk, and if they could vote the most horrible vote, that's what they had to do. That's what they did. The discipline that the Democrats have had has been pretty remarkable for some stuff that is very, very left-wing.
All right. To be as steeped in politics as you are is to be steeped in American history. So let me ask you to think like a historian. Answer me this. You mentioned when we were in the Reagan White House in the 80s. Ronald Reagan cut taxes, rolled back regulations, controlled domestic spending, and what happened? 25 years of economic expansion. And now we see the reverse, this lurch to the left. Why? Where did this come from? Nancy Pelosi didn't just, this didn't happen and this wasn't a coup. They were elected. Don't you, do you find, how did it happen? Do you feel frustrated with the American democracy that we seem to have learned something, and now all the lessons as if Ronald Reagan had never existed?
Well, first of all, I feel frustrated with the Republicans. We brought on ourselves. Spending, too much spending, and I think George Bush is a friend of mine. I'm very fond of him. I think he was so fixated on the war on terror that he made the decision, we'll give the Democrats and the left more spending to keep them at bay so that they won't really go out and fight me hard on the war on terror. But a lot of our base became disillusioned, felt like we'd lost our way. And the other thing is, Peter, the nature of the cycle is it's very hard for one party to keep the White House for more than one term. Since World War II, that's happened once. I mean, I said more than one term, more than 2 terms, more than one 2-term presidency.
Right.
And we did it with Bush and Franklin.
George H.W.
That's right, Daddy Bush. And we did it because the American people decided they didn't want Michael Dukakis as president.
Right.
You know, we should never forget, those of us who like to think it's because they wanted Reagan to have a 3rd term. The fact of the matter is Bush was behind 18 points in May and again in August, which sort of shoots our argument down a little bit. But the American people said, we don't want Dukakis, so we got a third term. Other than that, in mine and your lifetime, no party has kept the White House for a third term, and so we were due to lose. But we lost to a group that did a fairly good job of disguising, for the average person at least, their goals for moving so far to the left. I think some people who were really paying attention to his record could see it coming, but the news media certainly wasn't trumpeting his record.
No. All right, to the Republican Party here and the correct response to Barack Obama. George Will talked not long ago about the birth of the GOP, and he laid out, this was on television one Sunday morning, he laid out Senator Stephen Douglas, a Democrat of Illinois, proposed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which might have permitted slavery to be expanded into Kansas and Nebraska. And here's George Will, quote, "A lawyer from Springfield, Illinois named Lincoln said no." Now, was the Republican Party the party of no? You bet they were, and it was a good thing. Close quote. Is the GOP, once again, properly the party of no?
Well, there's certainly nothing wrong with being the party of no when what you're stopping is bad policy. And I'll be tickled to be the party of no as long as we're stopping or trying to stop things that are bad for the country. Because at the end of the day, the party and the people who are elected on the party's label, their job is to solve real problems and to deal with problems in a way that the American people recognize. I may not agree with that guy all the time, but he's trying to do the right thing. We're making progress. And trust the people enough to tell them the truth. That was one of the things that I when I was chairman of the party, I always tried to emphasize. The American people are strong and tough and smart. They can take the truth. You tell them the truth, and they can deal with it. I had to do that after Katrina, and that's what's expected: common sense, truth telling. And the Republicans are telling people what they know is the truth about this spending spree. Our country can't spend itself rich, just like your family can't spend itself rich. And you watch, Peter, we're about to see Obama come out with the great compromise on the deficit. He's going to say, you Republicans are so against the deficit, you agree to raise taxes, I'll agree to cut spending. The problem is not the deficit. The problem is spending.
Right.
And raising taxes is the enemy of controlling spending.